There's so much that you can do with particles inside of Resolve, and having a really good foundational knowledge can really open up some huge areas of creativity. So today we're going to look at where it all starts with the pEmitter node. Now this is quite a complicated node, so I'm going to break this down to just like the core elements, which should give you enough information to feel confident and inspired without getting overwhelmed. Once we've gone through the different controls on the node, I'll also walk you through 3 little examples of how you might use it creatively in your work. And then right at the end, I'm going to give you some bonus tips to help you speed up both the learning process and the building process. So the particle emitter node is actually part of a whole system of nodes, most of which are forces which can act upon the particles once they're emitted. And we'll definitely cover those in future videos. But for now, we'll just focus on the emitter, and I think you'll be surprised at how much you can do with just this one node actually. Okay, so very basic setup in here to begin with, just a black background, a merge and the media out. And then we're just going to grab a pEmitter and a p-render from the toolbar here and just connect those up. So the pEmitter goes into the yellow input of the render, and then we go into the merge like that. Now whenever you're building out particle systems, you're always going to need both of these nodes. Let's have a look in the inspector and see what's going on. We've got 5 tabs along the top here, and we're going to focus on control, style and region. In the controls tab, you can set the amount of particles that are going to appear, how long they'll last for and how they'll move on the screen. In the style tab, you can set things like color and size. And in the region tab, you can set the region that the particles are going to appear on the screen. So you can see here we have a circular region here. And I'm just going to make a couple of little adjustments just so that you can more easily see what's going on. So we'll just drag this region and make it a little bit bigger like that. And then go into the style tab and we'll change the style to blob and then boost the size. And don't worry, I'm going to come back and we'll explain all of these controls. Right, let's hop back into the control tab and go through everything in here. So starting at the top, we've got the number of particles that are going to appear and the number variance. The variance controls, you'll see these a lot. So you can see here you've got lifespan variance, and it sort of adds like a randomness to that control. So this will just randomize the number of particles appearing on the screen at any one time. The lifespan affects how long each particle is going to stay on the screen, and then you've also got a variance control for that one as well. Here we've got position variance. What that does is at the moment you can see all the particles are just appearing inside our region here, and if I boost this up you'll see that they'll start to appear in other places as well, just outside of the region. So moving down to the velocity, if I start to boost the velocity, you can see that the particles start to move in a certain direction, and then we also have a variance control for that as well. So you'll have particles moving at different speeds to each other. The angle control affects the direction that the particles are moving in, and then we've got variance for that as well. And then the angle Z is pretty cool. What that does is if I start to move it, you can see it affects how the particles move through the Z axis. So if I pull it right around like that, it makes it look like all the particles are coming towards us now. Rotation and spin are both for when you're working with particles in a 3D space, and we're not going to cover that today, so I'm just going to skip over those ones. And we can go straight into the style tab now. So up at the top we have a drop down with several different types of particles that you can have appear. To begin with, we'll just leave it on blob for now, and I'll go through some of these other controls, and as we work our way through these, a few of them have some different controls, and I'll explain those as we go. So first we have the color controls, which is pretty straightforward. You can change the color of the particles in there. Then we have color variance. This allows you to set ranges so that you can get slight variances in the colors. So now we've got green and blue particles appearing on there, so that's cool. We'll just reset that and move this back to white. And then under here we have this color over life control, and this one's really interesting actually. When I hover over here, you'll see a little plus appear next to the arrow there. And if I click now, it adds this extra little triangle control in there. So now I can add a different color in here. What that does then is, as the particle appears, it will be white, and as it goes through its lifespan, it will gradually turn red. And the really cool thing with this is you can add as many points as you want to this, so you could have each particle cycle through multiple different colors as it goes through its lifespan. So below that we have size controls. Obviously that's very self-explanatory. Size to velocity is quite interesting. That varies the size dependent on the velocity of each particle. So this comes into play particularly if you have it set in the controls tab over here, so there's variance in the velocity. If we up that by quite a bit and then go back to the style tab, and now the size to velocity, you can see that effect a little bit more if I adjust that. Then after that we've got this size Z scale, and this affects the perspective. So if I up that, it'll make it look like the particles are really coming right into the screen like this. That's pretty cool. And then we have this little box at the bottom here, which is size over life. So if I pull this down on this side and push this one up, then what's going to happen is the particles will start off really small, and as they go through their lifespan, they'll get bigger and bigger until the end. And you've also got these little handles in here so that you can make it into a nice little curve to give it a more natural sort of feel in there. Then at the bottom we've got fade controls, and what that does is if I pull it in from the left, it means that each particle will fade onto the screen, and then if I pull it in from the right, it'll fade the particles off the screen when they get to the end of their lifespan. So let's have a look at some of the other styles that we've got in here then. So the first one is point, and that's the default, and that's, as you might expect, lots of tiny little points. Then we've got bitmap, and this one's really interesting actually because it allows you to put an image into this yellow input of the emitter node, and instead of chucking out particles, it will chuck out lots and lots of versions of that image. So let me demonstrate for you. In the media pool over here, I've just got this little white arrow PNG, and if I pop that in there, then you can see it's just made lots and lots of versions of that little arrow. Now, one thing I would note here is be careful of what size image you put in here. This particular image is just 100 by 100 pixels, which is a pretty good size for this. If you start getting a lot bigger than that, your computer won't be happy about it. So at the bottom of the bitmap style, you've also got some blur controls for this, which is pretty self-explanatory, and you can blur over life so it can get more or less blurry as it goes across its lifespan. And you can also add like a little bit of a glow and things like that, which is very handy. So we've already covered blob. Next we've got brush, and this one is very similar actually to using this bitmap input, except instead of using an image that you put into the node, it's got some already loaded in this little drop down here. And now, to be perfectly honest, like a lot of these are a little bit cheesy and sort of generic, like this one's bombs, which, you know, I don't think I would ever use that, to be honest. There's a few in here which are kind of nice, you know, like some of the leaf ones are okay and things. And I think there is a way to actually input your own images into this, but I mean, I find myself just using the bitmaps a lot more if I want to use an image instead of particles. So next we have line, which, as you might expect, makes lots and lots of lines. Let's just boost the size right up like that. And this one also has this fade control, which see if I boost it right up, you might be able to see, if I stop it, that the lines fade in on one side. If I take that down, it just turns into a solid line. So that's quite nice. Then after that, we have Engon, or Engion. I don't know how to pronounce that. Engion? No, maybe that's right. This one's pretty cool. It basically makes lots of these little shapes here, and you can sort of fine tune those. So the amount of sides, you can see if it's like 3, we've got these 3 spikes. You can take that all the way up to whatever you want, so lots and lots. And then if you bring down the starriness, that basically smooths out those points. And this one's actually, it is actually really useful, this one, because like there's all these different shapes in here, and you know, they're quite useful for making things like bubbles or fake bokeh effects, stuff like that. So that's cool. And then after that, we've got point cluster, and this one, as you might expect, instead of making lots of points, make lots of clusters of points. You can adjust exactly how many points are in each cluster, and also add a variance to that as well. So this one's quite good for either slightly more smoky effects or things like fireworks and stuff like that. You can use this for. So let's have a look at the region tab now. So far we've just been using the sphere region, but there's all of these ones to explore as well. So right at the top we've got all, and that just puts points all over the screen. Then we have Bezier, and this one's really cool actually. This allows you to draw these points, and it will output particles along that line, and you can adjust the size and the angle, and it's also got these translation controls for positioning on screen and stuff, and obviously these are all keyframeable as well. After that, we've got bitmap. So this one uses a bitmap to create the range or area where the particles will appear. So as an example, if we take the same white arrow, and this time we're going to put it in the green input here, and then I'll just have to make some adjustments so that you can actually see this. So if I take the position variance right down and bring the number up, and then we'll just reset these angle controls and bring the velocity variance down, and there's our shape. So yeah, pretty cool. After that one, we've got cube, and this is actually a little 3D cube. If I revolve it like this, you can see. So that's pretty nice, like a sort of pseudo 3D shape in a 2D environment. After that one, we've got line, and this one lets you draw a line, and all of the particles will emerge along that line, and you can animate that in different ways. This is pretty cool. You could do some pretty cool lightsaber effects with that, for example. That's the first thing I think of anyway. After that, we've got mesh. That's another 3D control, so we're just going to skip that entirely. Then we've got rectangle, which is exactly what you would expect it to be. And you have size controls and also translation, rotation and pivot controls for that one. And then we're right back to sphere. So let's move on to some examples of how you might use this in your work. So as you can see, we've got exactly the same setup as before, with the pEmitter and pRender merged over a black background, and everything is on default settings. So let's go into the style tab, and we're going to use Engion, and then I'm going to select this hexagon. I think that's a hexagon, isn't it? Anyway, that one. Go into size controls. Let's make that 1. Let's actually just make this region a bit bigger as well, so we can see what we're doing. Cool. So I'm actually going to use bitmap for the region. Then we're going to grab a background and a polygon, and we're going to use these as our bitmap image. It goes in like that. Let's just pop this one in the viewer. We're going to make that background white, and if we go into the polygon, we can untick solid and just bring the border width up a little bit, and then we just need to draw our line. So the line that we draw here is essentially the path that the starry shapes are going to follow along. So just add some points in like this. You can drag to get like smooth curves. And so now let's bring down that border width a little bit, and let's bring the length really way down like that, so it's just a little bit at the start. Now come into the beginning of the clip and put a keyframe on the position, and then go to the end, and we're going to move that position all the way to the end like so, and that's automatically added a keyframe in there for us. Okay, so let's put the media out back in the viewer now, and here's what we've got so far. So let's add a little bit more styling to this. In fact, we'll go into the controls. Let's add a little bit of velocity, go into the middle here. Let's add a bit of angle variance and also velocity variance. Let's bring the lifespan down by quite a bit, so that's around about, let's make it 35. Cool. Let's go into the style tab. We'll come into the color controls first, and we're going to go into the color over life controls. I'll add a point at the end here, and then we'll make that blue. You can make it whatever color you want, go wild. So now you can see we're going from white to blue in there. And then let's also add some color variance to this. Let's add a little bit more of the green variance in there. Then we'll come to the size controls. So I want it to start off very small and end up a lot bigger like that. And we'll add a little curve in here just because that generally looks better. Something like that's looking good to me. Let's add some size variance in there as well. And then also I want them to fade in and out. We'll add a little bit of blur at the end. So if we just bring this up, let's try 0.1, that's better. Just adds a little bit of a blur at the end there, which is nice. Let's try 0.2 actually. Yeah, that's good. Cool, and that's pretty much the whole look done. So if we play that through, you can see that it follows that path. Nice, and what's cool about this is we've used a polygon in here, but you could use any of the masks as well. You could use a square or a circle and have these revolve around that. So yeah, lots of options with that one. So we've got the same basic setup, and we're going to dive straight into the style tab and change the style to blob. And I'll just bring the size right up as well. Let's make the region quite a bit bigger. Then let's come into the control tab and increase the particle number and also boost the position variance. Just whack that right up. We can also take the lifespan and lifespan variance up a little bit, and also the number variance. We'll add a little bit of velocity, and then what we also want to do is change the angle Z so that it's pointing towards the camera. So if you want to just put the number in, that's around about -90. We'll get you there. And then also let's add a little bit of velocity variance to that. I also want to come into the style tab again, and let's have them get smaller as they go through the lifespan. And then the thing that's going to really bring this look together actually is we're going to add, after the P render, we'll add a radial blur. And let's bring the strength of that up by quite a lot. Now just to complete the look, what we're going to do is add a background and an ellipse, and we'll just merge that over the top. And this one I'm going to make a similar color to the background, and then we'll also come into the ellipse and bring up the soften edge. And then I'm just going to go into the merge and just use the size control in the merge to just resize that. Obviously you could add a transform in after this background, but you can just do it in the merge and that saves you adding another node. So let's copy and paste those and merge that one over the top. But we're going to change the background of this one to black, go into the ellipse, take that soft edge off, and then go into the merge and just resize that so that it's just over the top like that. And that's our finished look. Pretty cool, really easy. And I'm just noticing there's all this kind of glitchiness at the edge here. So let's just fix that. If you go into the radial blur, and we can go into the advanced controls and change border type from replicate to black, and that fixes that problem. And it's worth actually playing around with the blur type in here. At the moment it's on realistic, but stylized also looks pretty cool. So there you go, that's the effect anyway. So for this last example, we're going to make some sort of fiery text. And with fire emulation stuff, you know, you can go into some crazy amounts of detail. But for this tutorial, I'm just going to keep things super simple. So let's go into our emitter node, go into the style tab, and we're going to change that to blob and just bring the size right up. So we'll make that 8. And we'll make the size variance 2, and that'll help us see what we're doing. And then come into the region tab and change that to bitmap. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a text node as the bitmap for the region. So pop that in there into the yellow input. So let's just set up our text. I'm using all caps and then a nice chunky typeface for this. And let's just bring the size up a little bit. Cool. So back in our emitter node, let's go back into the style tab and we'll set up the color now. So if you come down to color over life controls, and we're going to add a little triangle at the end here and make that a nice deep red. Then another one in the middle, and we'll make that a yellow color, and then another one here, and we want that to be like a nice light yellow. Cool. So let's just adjust these a little bit. We'll pull the red in some more because I want quite a lot of red, like that. And then what I'm also going to do is change the size over life. So we'll have them start off small and get bigger as they progress. And then let's add a little bit of a curve to that as well to give it a sort of natural look. And now we can start to see our look emerging there. Okay, so what I also want to do is just add a little bit of a fade at the end there. And then we'll come into the control tab. So in here, what I'm going to do is I'll boost the particle numbers right up. So I'm going to make them 200. And I'm also going to boost the number variance up. And that will help fill the letters basically. But then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the lifespan right down, and we want to bring that down to around about 24. So that will help add like a sort of shimmeriness to them. So if I play this now, you can see there's already like a little bit of movement because of this. But then what we'll do as well is we'll just add a tiny little bit of velocity. So let's try 0.02. And then we'll change the angle as well so that it's sort of flowing upwards. I think I'll actually make that velocity even less. There we go, that's about right. And there's our fiery effect. And finally, for my bonus tip, inside of the effects tab, if you look in templates and fusion, there's this particles section, and in here there's a whole load of pre-formed particle systems, and this is super useful. I mean, obviously you might be able to find use for these specific ones within your projects, but I think more importantly this is a brilliant learning resource, because you can just grab one of these and chuck it on the timeline, and there's this pre-formed particle system, so you can go through all of the nodes and look at how things are hooked up and how things are working, and even make your own adjustments to fit your project. And there's some actually pretty cool stuff in here. This one is blowing leaves. Then there's also things like smokestack, quite realistic looking smoke there. And some of them you'll notice, like I think this bokeh edges, yeah, that's as a group basically. So if you want to get to the nodes in that one, all you have to do is right click on it and go to expand group, and that'll just expand the group right out, and you can get to all of the nodes. So there you go, that's it. Hope you found that helpful. As usual, any questions, just pop them in the comments, and I will see you next time.